You will be building
You will
the model
be
that
following
you see.
the VEX building rules
You need to
in
get
order
all
to
of
build
the parts
what you see
out
on your
of the
screen
kit
and place them in front of you like you see them on your screen. The gear size of the two circular gears is not important. You can have any two sizes. Please pause the video while you get these parts out and arrange them in the way that you see them on the screen. We are going to be using a lot of axles and shafts. These will help make your mechanism very stable. Rule number 1, axles always go through two pieces of metal. Pick up your axle and your C-channel. Put your axle through one piece of metal. Do you see how it moves around and is not stable? The first rule is that an axle always goes through two pieces of metal. Put your axle through both sides of the C-channel. See how much more stable it is? Rule number 2, bearing flats get attached to metal when an axle goes through the metal. When your axle is through the metal and you wiggle it around, you hear a ringing sound. The axle is still loose. We don't want it to wiggle. Pick up a bearing flat, feel both sides. Do you notice that one side is a little sharp? This is the side that you put onto the metal. The sharp prongs line up to the squares on the metal. It won't stay there by itself, but it sort of clicks in. Set the back bearing flat down and we will come back to it later. Pick up a pop rivet and take the two pieces apart. One piece, the rivet, is the hollow part, and the other part is the pin. When the pin goes all the way into the rivet, it opens up the end of the rivet outward and makes it stay attached to an object. To use the pop rivet, always keep the rivet and the pin together, but pulled apart a little bit. The pop rivet keeps the bearing flat attached to the metal. You see how it's pulled apart just a little bit. The bearing flat can be put on either side of the metal. We will put this one on the outside of the C-channel. The pop rivet always gets attached to the opposite side of the metal. Cut out of your screen a little bit, just hang on. So you're going to take the pop rivet and you're going to put it through the two outside holes. Again, the pop rivet is going in on the opposite side of the metal. Then place the other bearing flat directly across from the first one. We will put this bearing flat on the inside of the C-channel. That means the pop rivets get attached from the outside. Pause your video to make sure that your bearing flats and pop rivets look like the one on the screen. Your pop rivets should look like two little buttons on the opposite side of the bearing flat. Now place your axle back through the C-channel. You should notice now that it doesn't make the rattling sound and that the axle is much more stable. Rule number 3. Shaft collars lock onto shafts and keep them into place. Slide your axle through the bearing flat, prepared C-channel, center it as much as possible, and we want the axle to stay there. Take a shaft collar. This is the shaft collar. It sort of looks like a donut, but you notice the side of it has a little tiny screw that you're going to tighten and loosen. Be careful not to loosen it all the way so that the tiny screw does not fall out and get lost. Next, slide the shaft collar onto the axle and tighten the shaft collar onto the axle so that it stays in place. Take a green circular gear, place it on the other side of the axle. Notice the axle can still fall out. We want to lock that in place. Take the other shaft collar, place it on the axle on the outside of the gear, and lock it into place, turning towards the right. Notice that on one side, we put a shaft collar between the gear and the C-channel, and on the other side we didn't. Just make sure the bearing flat or pop rivets don't interfere with the spinning of the gears. Rule number 4, Kep's nuts are always attached with the star part facing the metal. Look at the Kep's nut. Notice how one side looks like a metal star that spins around. This side always gets screwed on toward the screw. Pick up your long screw. The round end of the screw is called the screw head. This is where the Allen wrench fits in to tighten it. Place the screw through the C-channel so that it sticks out onto the opposite side. Place your finger on the head of the screw. Twist the Kep's nut on to the opposite side of the screw with the star part facing the screw. Use your Allen wrench to tighten the screw. Make sure the Kep's nuts don't spin while you're tightening the screw. If it does, use the EDR wrench to hold the Kep's nut in place. Place the small screw through the side of the C-channel and tighten it with a Kep's nut. Screws and Kep's nuts are used to hold metal together. The last thing we're going to do is attach the rack gear. Look at the bottom of the rack gear. What color do you notice the screw holes are? Gold, that's right. That means you need the gold screws. No, they're not really gold, so don't try to take them. The screws should line up. The screw holes of the rack gear should line up with the square holes on the metal, sort of like the bearing flat. Once it's clicked into place, use the gold screw and the skinny Allen wrench to attach the rack gear to metal. One screw through the center will be enough. Voila, you are done. Follow these simple rules when you build and you will have a very sturdy mechanism. Now you may take your stand off. We're going to use that to attach your gadget to another person's gadget. Notice the end of the standoff is hollow. That means you can put screws through the end of it. You're going to put a screw from the inside of the C-channel, and you're going to screw the standoff on the outside of the C-channel next to the rack gear. Once you've done that, you can now attach your gadget to your neighbor's gadget, and you should have a symmetrical looking object.